Well, good evening, everyone here in North America. Hello to everyone joining us across various platforms tonight, Facebook, YouTube, and of course on the Flight Simulation Association website. My name is Evan, and I'm joined in the background by my colleague and co-founder of Flight Simulation Association, Phil, who you can't see but is busy answering chat questions and helping me out in the background. And on the screen beside me, you can see Chris McGonegle, product manager and the head of the Flight Simulation department at Sporty's Pilot Shop. We're very excited to have Chris on with us tonight, looking at some of the different products that bridge the gap between real world flying in actual airplanes and the flying that we do here in flight simulation on our computers. Now, Sporty's Pilot Shop, for those who don't know, is one of, if not the largest suppliers of pilot supplies. So that's typically been things like bags and electronic flight bags and even little flight computers, and has now expanded to include many of the things that we here in flight simulation know and love, whether that be ForeFlight Mobile, which can of course connect to our simulators, or things like the Honeycomb yoke, which places like Sporty's have become a go-to place to find those very hot commodity items these days. So we're really excited to have him here. He's a pilot as well, first solo over a decade ago, and has been flying Cessna 172s ever since in the real world, and he's a simmer just like the rest of us, and we were just chatting a few minutes ago about some of the flying he's done in Microsoft Flight Sim and some of the other big titles. So he'll be taking us through tonight's presentation here in just a moment. Now, folks, if you have questions, we certainly love those. We'll be saving them predominantly for the end, but that doesn't mean you can't submit them. So please, as we're going today, if you have questions for Chris that you'd like him to answer, if you're an FSA captain, you can just fire them directly at us in the chat. For FSA first officers, you'll have the option to submit a question. So please do that. We appreciate your questions. We'll take care of all of those at the end of tonight's presentation. And for now, I'll hand things over to Chris to walk us through bridging the gap, looking at some of these products that apply to us here in flight simulation and that apply equally to those who are flying airplanes. Chris, over to you.
Well, thank you, Evan, and thank you to everyone at FSA. I'm happy to be here and discuss products for simulation and real-world flying. A little bit about myself is I work at Sporty's Pilot Shop, as Evan pointed out. I am the product manager here. I went through Sporty's Academy, which is in tandem with the University of Cincinnati. I did, I would say 90 to 95% of my flying in a Cessna 172. There was also a Piper Aztec involved, a few other basic aviation training devices, but as you can see in that image, those 172s were the bread and butter of my training, and I like to think I know one quite well. I am a commercial certificate holder with an instrument rating, and I'm also the flight simulator specialist here at Sporty's Pilot Shop. We like to practice what we preach, so we make it an obligation to go flying from time to time. The picture on the left was actually taken this morning as a group of 7 of us in 3 different airplanes flew to a local airport for some pancakes and coffee before heading into the office. You can see the morning mist as it's rolling through the hills of central Ohio. And then the photo on the right was a lunch meeting that me and a couple teammates decided we were going to fly to Northern Ohio for. So we like to really make sure that we stay attuned to flying an airplane, testing out new gear, but also, making sure that is kind of a secondary skill of ours rather than just being in the office and producing content and products. So tonight's mission, we're going to talk about what products or services associated with flight simulation either complement or supplement flight training and currency. We'll cover these in 3 different phases. The first will be focused on what parts of flight simulation are introductory towards actual flight. I like to relate this phase to, let's say, you're really enjoying your flight simulator and you want to start taking it more towards a training scenario or take that step towards actual flight. These are going to be the components that get you in that direction. Number 2 is what's available in the flight simulator world to assist in training. Okay, we've decided, you know what, we're going to do it. We're going to go get our license. What pieces of a simulator can I use to help out with early training or supplement early training? And then lastly, we're going to talk about what can we take from a simulator onto the flight deck. All right, so introductory products. I like to highlight the missions and the learning modules. And we're going to start off with X-Plane. I relate these to kind of dipping the toe in the water, if you will, towards physical flying in a digital world. X-Plane offers complementary modules for general aviation. They have, as you can see, some basics, takeoffs, kind of an instruction, if you will, of, okay, you're in the world. Here's how you actually operate an airplane rather than just power on, see what happens. They also offer navigation and then helicopters, which I must admit is very foreign to me. Um, when starting a simulator program, as I kind of mentioned, it's easy to just jump in a wide body or a corporate jet, whatever has the fastest cruising speed, and full throttle, and let's just see what happens. Let's do a barrel roll while we're at it. And I'm guilty of that too. But I believe through missions, a flight simmer is moving towards a better understanding of the fundamentals of flight rather than playing a game. And the missions are a great way to start that process. The new Microsoft Flight Simulator offers missions to get you started. And as you can see above, there's both granular details like the basic controls or what instruments do, but there's also aviation protocols, such as number 5, which is introducing a traffic pattern. Every time I fly an airplane, I'm flying a traffic pattern when I'm coming back to Claremont County or another airport. Now, that is excluding instrument approaches, but it's helpful to explain and highlight these fundamentals in a flight simulation world. And that way, you're one step closer understanding a pattern approach when you do get in an actual airplane. Prepared. They offer very detailed missions, which I really appreciate. As you can see, these give you more background than the previous programs, and they really answer the early on simmer question of, what should I do with this program? I've got a great computer, I've got some great hardware, but what do I really do with this? And I think Prepared is really good at giving you kind of a direction on what you can do with these flight simulators. Here we have a Civil Air Patrol search in Idaho. We're given a mission briefing covering all pertinent details, excuse me, of navigation and communications for today's mission. These well-written out briefings confirm that it's a simulator rather than a game. And I think this is a really good step towards, if you did become a pilot, these are actual missions you could be flying. So I really like that. And it applies to this being, again, more of a simulator than just a game with sounds, if you will. We also have add-ons for said simulators. We have learning modules or missions, which will apply to the top name simulators out there. For anyone who has a flight simulator and has decided to start flight training, I think these are very helpful sim courses that have the potential of shaving down flight training time required to attain a certain certificate. When you have a better understanding of, say, night flying or VORs and all their nuisance, and yes, VORs are still in use today, to have a better understanding of just how that VOR works, it will help with your training and give you a better understanding early on of said training. So quite a bit of value there. Middle tier. So these are now the step of, I've decided I want to get my license. What should I do? But also things that can complement us in a trainer. So we've wanted to start flight training and strengthen, the muscles through practice of a simulator. I think the starting point is a good digital course. These courses will offer you professional instruction on why an airplane acts and flies the way that it does. And when you have an understanding of that in flight, the simulator will follow. So some of the lessons you're going to learn in these courses, they will translate into real life, but then also work well in the simulator. M0A on the left is a very responsive program offering consistent webinars, digital videos, and questionnaires. It's really good at follow-up and making sure that you are consistently learning. One of their taglines is, a good pilot is always learning, and I agree with it. On the right, we have King's Schools, which is well known in the aviation world. And John and Martha King are still in front and center of the majority of their content. They have a lot of different courses, and I would be very surprised if you found something you were looking for that they did not offer a course on. Sporty's also offers an all-encompassing course, which is devoted to early flight training. Once purchased, you own this product for life. And the amount of widgets and details, video updates included, they'll always update, and your ownership stays with you, whether you learn you get your private today and you continue progressing, or if you fall into the category of, say, a rusty pilot and you take maybe 5 or 6 years off, you can come back into the fold with this course, which you'll still have access to, and get all the new content that's been added in your time away. We also have a quote unquote, I like to call it, flight sim training course outline included in this, which I'll clarify is not required for completion of this course. When you finish this course, take a couple of practice tests above 80%, you will actually get a written endorsement. But we have had to make it crystal clear that the flight sim training course outline included is not required to get that endorsement. There's 14 lessons in said course and kind of just some instruction on those early phases of flight and what you can do with the simulator. We also have a course diet, if you will, titled Get Started with Learning to Fly. It's an easy way for you to test out kind of our dashboard and our flow of the way the course works. It is free and available to test out and see if it's going to work for you. Middle tier, I also want to touch on accurate hardware. The reason I say that is, there are some flight sim controls out there that are very far away from the real thing. And if someone only logs time in a flight simulator using controls that are, say, completely plastic or the cheapest on the market, it's going to take away from your expectation if you ever get in a real airplane. I like to cite the Honeycomb Alpha on the left side of the screen. The fact that it has a full 90 degrees rotation left and 90 degrees right is pretty unique when it comes to the price point it lives at. And the fact that it also uses cords on the interior rather than a lot of springs, which other yokes have, there's more sense to a change in the amount of tension as you get further and further aft and forward, which is relatively accurate when you're flying an airplane. So it's a great piece I like to recommend if you're looking for a good solid yoke that's not gonna bank or break the bank. Speaking of breaking the bank, though, on the right we have the Redbird alloy. I like to cite this piece because, like I said earlier on, I did almost all my training in a Cessna 172, which is the vernier push-pull throttle. So it's important to sim like you're going to fly. And the Redbird alloy is, I would say, the most popular push-pull at the time right now. Now, again, it is expensive. It is something you have to make sure you're serious about if you're going to commit to, but it is a great piece. It's almost completely metal. And in my experience, it is very, very close to what you will feel if you get an Cessna 172. Rudder pedals, I believe, are one of the first passed on pieces of hardware when it comes to flight simulation. A lot of people, as I kind of hinted at earlier, they just want the yoke and they want the throttle. The pedals, why do I need those? Well, if you're gonna, again, sim like you fly, you need to have coordinated flight. When those turns or when you're climbing out, you need to give a little bit of rudder to counteract P factor and torque, some of those things in the propeller. You're going to need to have rudder control, and pedals are the accurate way to do it in a simming environment. Also, if you start your airplane from, say, a push-off spot or not on the runway, good luck taxiing to said runway without control of your rudder. So something to consider. And again, another piece to make sure you're simming authentically, if you will.
I was going to just comment on that rudder piece. I think that's fantastic point. And at only about 50% in our survey of flight simmers said that they sort of use rudder pedals, which was really surprising to me for a lot of the reasons that you say. I mean, yes, you can put some of those functions on a joystick, but the taxiing, the braking, and for anyone who likes to simulate airliners, the only time a rudder pedal is helpful, which is a crosswind landing, I think that's really invaluable. So lots of great options out there for rudder pedals, and if that's something you've passed on, you're one of those people, might be a chance to try and take a look at that now, because they certainly do add quite a bit to the sim experience.
Agreed. Well put, Evan. Agreed. And yeah, like you mentioned, good luck in a crosswind landing if you do not have rudder control. It is not going to be a video that you want to put on Facebook. And then lastly, a trim wheel is the final piece for our accurate hardware. A trim control is something that you do not understand how important it is until you've got a few dozen hours under your belt. It is called, or the best way to relate it is, a trimmed airplane is one that is in its natural state. And if you don't have that trim control, your airplane is always going to be fighting, or most likely fighting, unless you have the perfect power setting. So having the ability to accurately use a wheel, such as what's in the Cessna 172 as your trim control, there's something to that, and it creates a muscle memory that does translate well into when you're actually flying the airplane. And then I apologize, there's one more slide when it comes to accurate hardware. You can get headsets that will work in the flight simulator very close to what you would in real life. On the left, we have the Thrustmaster headset. And then on the right, we have the David Clark USB headset. And I have tested it. This headset from David Clark is based off the H10-13.4, and they changed out the cord from a PJ plug to a USB-A plug. So the tension on your head, the amount of weight, those ear seals that you can see are identical to if you bought the H10-13.4. So something I've mentioned a few times now is, if you want to sim like you fly, here's how you're going to make sure you get that pressure on your head, which every pilot is familiar with in an airplane. All right, so introductory flight prep, if you will. One item that would transition from the flight deck to a flight sim and vice versa, that first one's going to be a kneeboard. And I know a lot of people are balking at this and laughing, but if you get accustomed to using a kneeboard on a flight simulator, or getting proficient with it, or understanding the layout of how it sits on your knee, or where those little applicable pieces are, you can see in the picture on the left, we've got a backup battery powering an iPad. We've also got a pen if you want to take down craft the old-fashioned way. It does translate well, and then also you'll feel more proficient and able in the actual airplane if you've got a few hours using it in the simulator. So something worth considering, and I think worth mentioning. Another thing for flight prep is communications. Early on in my flight training, talking on the radios was intimidating. Most pilots, including myself, hold the other voice on the radio to a type of authoritative stature, if you will. And it took me a few hours to get over that initial fear of using incorrect terminology, and realize that ATC, or that tower voice I heard, was just another person looking out for me and wanting to keep me safe. They're crisp and short, but they have to be. It's due to efficiency. If you are like me and you feel a little bit intimidated by communications or using the correct terminology, a great piece is the ARSim Aviation Radio Simulator. It uses speech analysis and voice recognition to score each scenario or phraseology. So you get feedback on your terminology, or your timeliness to respond, or how you read back a clearance or something of that sort. It is available for both VFR and also IFR communications training. They are based on a subscription model, renewing once a year. But if you buy both options, you will save $40. A very, very good piece, and something that I think can save you time in a flight simming world, which To rent a Cessna 172 on an instructor, you're going to be looking at maybe $120 to $150 per hour. So if you can shave off an hour of getting comfortable on comms, this is absolutely worth it. So let's say you've got an understanding of comms, and you want to upgrade to, instead of speaking to a robotic voice and getting analysis, you want to speak with real people within your flight simulator. Well, there's a good option for you. Here we have VATSIM and also Pilot Edge. These are great utilities to complement a flight simulator that focuses on communications. They work in tandem with the simulator, and they bring a layer of realism to a phase of simulated flight that is very, very important. VATSIM has about 80,000 members, I believe, last time I checked, and it's a great free add-on to your simulator. It is very, very helpful at getting comfortable talking to another human being. And it's one that I really, really enjoy. And I think a lot of people have benefited from it in the simulation community, and then also in the aviation flying community, if you will. Pilot Edge is an additional step towards the real thing. They employ real-world air traffic controllers or tower controllers to be the voice you'll hear on their network. My earlier mention of needing to humanize these officials is completed with Pilot Edge. You're talking to someone who's going to be the same voice you might talk to when you're keying in on your 172 or whatever airplane you're in. But because there are professionals who are using this trade of theirs at home, instead of the airport, they are compensated by Pilot Edge. And because they are compensated to run Pilot Edge on your flight simulator, it requires a subscription plan. There's a monthly payment plan ranging from $19.95 up to $34.90 a month. There's also a discount if you purchase an annual subscription. And they also offer a free trial, including 5 hours of network time, so you can try or fly, if you will, before you buy. Another fun feature of Pilot Edge is that they are hosting an upcoming sim venture, which is a digital fly-in using actual AirVenture node and procedures, in addition to the actual air traffic controllers who work at AirVenture. Anyone who's been to AirVenture / Oshkosh knows that traffic pattern gets very, very dicey and very busy. Well, here's a way that you're able to train for that approach by talking to the controllers, the rocking of the wings, the time to chop and drop it type atmosphere. It should be a fun presentation that they are putting on. I believe it's a week to 2 weeks before AirVenture this year. I'd check out their website for more details and have fun. But in conclusion, VATSIM and Pilot Edge are both really great add-ons for a flight sim. They will expedite your training, and they are absolutely applicable to real-world training and to getting more comfortable in the airplane and managing all of your responsibilities. Avionics are a great piece to practice on. I distinctly remember when I was just getting comfortable flying an airplane. I'm keeping this airplane aloft, I'm keeping an altitude, a heading, airspeed. Okay, now you got to learn a computer in the center of it and how to navigate it while you're doing this thing that scares a lot of people. It was very, very challenging, and I wish I had known about RealSimGear avionics when I was doing my flight training. The ability to have very realistic feeling knobs and buttons, as you can see, also with the ability to load your procedures, find out what happens when you turn 3 dials to the left from the nav chapter 1 page. Just getting a practice at home for excluding the upfront purchase, almost nothing, to, again, when I said it's about $150 per hour in the real world training, these things almost pay for themselves within a week. So absolutely worth considering. As you can see on the left, we have the RealSimGear GNS 530. That's actually the piece that was in the majority of the birds I flew. I also did a 430 quite a bit, but that would be a great one for your desk. And then they have the touchscreen GTN 750 on the right. And again, a lot of customers will ask me, I want to have something that's very close to what I fly in real life. If you have these avionics in your airplane, this is a great way to learn them or get extremely proficient with them. ForeFlight. This may be one of the most important pieces I cover in tonight's webinar, and just because it is the most at bridging the gap, if you will. It's a phenomenal EFB or electronic flight bag to pair with any flight simulator. The ability to track a flight's location, performance, and even add AHRS is great. Starting our coverage of ForeFlight, I have a trip from our home airport of India 69er planned to Lincoln, Nebraska. I have superimposed the ILS 18 approach plate onto the map, and my entry is at the Husker initial approach fix. As you can see, we also have a little bit of weather tracking our way to the northwest. We can change said filter to show color infrared, and that gives us a little bit more forecasting, or we can understand if this is growing. And at the bottom, you'll see a play button. We can progress it from the previous 1.2 hours up until about now. And that gives us an idea of if it's growing, if it's dissipating, a helpful feature. ForeFlight flight review. Here we have a couple reviews of a few flights I logged a while ago in Flight Sim. On the left screen, you can see a little bit before the 9 a.m. mark, I simulated an engine out scenario about 7 miles from Wilmington at 3,500 MSL. I have to admit, I made it easy on myself by lining right up with the runway, but testing of energy and gliding and wind add flaps, I did quite well. But the next one I may make it challenging. I'm flying perpendicular to a runway or something of that sort. But this gives me the ability to go back and look at my airspeeds, my altitudes, and figure out what I should have done differently. On the right, you can see I departed Sporty's and flew over to Lunken for the 2-1 left ILS approach to stay true to training. And I'm a broken record at this point. I keep saying that, but there's a reason for it. I made sure to fly the outbound leg and also the lasso towards the intercept. My airspeed and altitude were a little shaky early on, but I felt pretty good. When coming in, I had a perfect target on the ILS. And this was also a scenario where I took the weather and I brought it down to about 150 feet above minimums. That is another great aspect of a flight simulator. You can see what it's like to break out close to the go-around point, which is much better to try a few times in a computer than flying it actually in real life. Traffic. After weather, I think, is the most convenient feature of ForeFlight. After the January 1, 2020 ADS-B out mandate went into effect, which was, it's wild to think, about 1.5 years now, it's fair to say that majority of the planes in the sky, and I can't say with 100%, the flight levels and closer to airspace are ADS-BL. So if we have an ADS-B in receiver, think of a Stratus or a Sentry device, we are able to project those live targets onto ForeFlight. Here we have all the airplanes between Claremont County and Louisville Tuesday morning of this week. I can also zoom in and grab public details. So November 6-1 Charlie Whiskey is a Cirrus SR-22 heading 325 at 95 knots. They are at this moment 83.8 nautical miles to the southwest of my current position. And if I'd like, if I know who that pilot is, or it's someone I'm expecting to fly my way, I can tag them by tapping that target icon in the top right, and it'll make sure that they are highlighted or tagged on my map as I scroll around and move around. But traffic, I think, is, after weather, one of the most important features, and it was one this morning I was happy we had when coming back. A pilot was not on the correct frequency, heading right our way at our altitude. So it gave us that heads up of, okay, they are not changing course. We're going to deviate right about 30 degrees and play it safe. AHRS. We can also enable AHRS for added safety. Think airspeed or heading indicator emergencies. It's also great for situational awareness. Here's a screen grab from this morning's flight. as we were heading back to Claremont County, we swung out to the south side of the lake to make sure we entered a 45-degree leg towards left downwind for runway 22 here at Claremont County on the center top of our screen. It's on the right side. As you can see, there are a few planes behind us. And also, there is a plane that is on left downwind for runway 22 right at our altitude. Now, what's great is on the left side, which is the AHRS projection, you can see that target painted against the outside or relative to where we should be looking. So, I'd say it's a little bit to the right of our 12 o'clock. They are 3.1 nautical miles away, and the 0 indicates they're right at our altitude. We're losing it in the terrain, but that is the identifier right there also, November 121 Uniform Charlie. So it's a great piece to help you find those targets while also giving you all the information of I'm at 1,860 feet, my vertical speed is 0, and I'm cruising at about 111. So I'm very happy with it. And again, this is a feature of ForeFlight that pays dividends every time. It gives me a peace of mind or confidence when I'm flying in a busy airspace area.
Chris, on the subject of ForeFlight, question from
Yes.
Dana. Does Flight Review work with Microsoft Flight Sim and X-Plane as well?
It does. So you will have a track log after a flight. You can save said track log, and then you are able to go ahead and use those flight reviews. Among other things, you can actually go back and replay the flight. It is a very helpful way, an applicable way to analyze and critique your flight and figure out what you should have done differently.
All right, thanks, Chris. Thank you, Dana, for the question.
3D flight. This is a great feature that ForeFlight rolled out. Don't quote me here, but I want to say within the last year. And it's a great way to look at the digitized route of your flight. I'm a very visual learner. I've tried listening to podcasts to learn. It doesn't take. I need to read a book. I need to see graphics. And the 3D flight has really been helpful for me from a review phase and also from a planning phase. That same flight to Louisville that I mentioned a little bit earlier, I planned a few slides ago. At about 3.5 minutes into said flight, we can expect to be around 4,340 feet. And it also gives you kind of a graphical 2D, if you will, representation of the ground. Now, I want to catch myself. I said 2D. I actually mean three-dimensional. If I was to go out west to where some of the mountainous areas are, it would give you relative mountain terrain. So 2D was the wrong terminology there, but it is, I guess, at the time, flat ground. It is going to be similar to what is projected out there. And I like this feature, as I said, for flying into mountainous regions so you can visually inspect the area or know, okay, I just came over this peak. It's time to start my descent. It is very, very helpful in that aspect. We also have the relatively new feature of layers. And on the right side of the screen, you can see a 12K indicated. This tells ForeFlight to project turbulence squares on the screen wherever it's reported at 12,000 feet. So you can make out some light blue blocks ahead on our route, but luckily we're not climbing to 12,000 feet. When we bring that variable down to 1,000 feet, you'll see there is a bit of turbulence projected up ahead. So this is telling us it's being reported at 1K. Just be prepared, and you can move that slider to different levels for your cruising altitude or different step downs for your approach. Very helpful and visually helping feature, which benefits me quite a bit. I'd like to make note that this feature is not only for turbulence, it also works for icing. So very helpful piece with 3D flight. We also have the ability to save or review digital documents. Here we have a few flight plan forms and guides. We also have the ability to investigate weather reports and forecasts. Prog charts included here, and as you can see, the additional charts and forecasts on the left side of the page. We can get pertinent airport information for the airport we're flying to in the Airports tab. We can pick up a lot of the necessary airport information on the top half of the page and get more granular as we move more towards the bottom of the page. Here we have the latest METAR report. We are able to find out which runway is going to be best for our flight that day. It includes headwind component, crosswind component, any closures, as you can see, 1129 and then also 17 left, 35 right are closed. We can dive into the available procedures. And then lastly, we can even study the airport diagram. A lot of great features, and I kind of only skimmed off the top of what the airport focus is. So, you know, a lot included in ForeFlight. And a great thing about this is these are all backed up on your iPad. So let's say you're flying around, you don't have internet or connectivity. You know, these are backed up. And a great other feature of ForeFlight is, let's say you have a route from India 69er, like I mentioned, down to Louisville. They will create a, I believe it's 20-mile, maybe 30-mile radius along your route and back all those up too. So if you have to defer to, say, an airport halfway through your flight, you don't have to worry about the save charts. They're all in there. And because it's all digitized, it doesn't take up much room relative to the size of today's iPads. I like to mention our company has sold charts for quite a long time. I can't give away numbers, but it is fair to say that ForeFlight has made a dent in the chart printing business. And I think the days of us seeing commercial pilots or airline pilots lugging around those large chart briefcases are no more.
Let's hope so.
All right, ForeFlight testing. I'm sure there are a few people in the audience who are familiar with Infinite Flight. It's a mobile flight simulation program. And what I enjoy about Infinite Flight is it easily configures with ForeFlight and is a great way to test all the features I've gone over. So let's say there's a new rollout of a new version of ForeFlight and there's you know, new option ABC. I'll immediately jump on my phone, load up a flight, have them working and talking to each other, and then go test those features. And it's really great to have that ability to do it while I'm at my desk, rather than jump on over to a flight sim PC. Now, again, you can use ForeFlight with X-Plane, with Microsoft Flight Simulator, with Prepared. But sitting at my desk at the office while I am typing emails or putting together webinars, it's really helpful just to have it working in the background and log that experience with how ForeFlight operates. So closing out ForeFlight, I think if there's one product that will live in the flight simulation arena, but then it's also in the physical airplane, it is this program. And I am still, to this day, finding out new reasons I really, really like it. One of the most common questions I receive is, can I log time in a flight simulator? And the answer to that question is yes. We offer the Redbird TD and the TD2. Now, during the summer of 2018, the FAA announced some changes aimed towards making it easier for pilots to keep their instrument currency using an aviation training device, or ATD for short. When a Redbird TD, which we have on the left, yes, confirmed, and then a TD2, which is on the right, it's got a few more hardware pieces, a little bit more configured. When you pair those with rudder pedals, it qualifies as a basic aviation training device. Federal Aviation Regulation 6151 was amended to remove any reference to a flight instructor, so pilots can fly instrument flight at home without scheduling an instructor. And just for sake, I'm going to quickly read FAR 6151. It goes, a person may use time in a full flight simulator, flight training device, or aviation training device for satisfying instrument currency experience requirements, provided a logbook or training record is maintained to specify the training device, time, and the content. In addition, FAR 61.57 was also amended to allow a flight simulator, flight training device, or aviation training device to be used for maintaining instrument experience, which covers the familiar 6 approaches. Again, I'll read it. FAR 61.57 reads, provided the device represents the category of aircraft for the instrument rating privileges to be maintained and the pilot performs the tasks and iterations in simulated instrument conditions, a person may complete the instrument experience in any combination of an aircraft, full flight simulator, flight training device, or aviation training device. I've had our lawyers filter through that so we can put it in layman's terms, which I needed. Long story short, if we have a basic aviation training device paired with some rudder pedals, we are able to log instrument experience or currency without an instructor. This is a great way to stay instrument current when those seasonal months preclude us from getting airborne, and a great way to make sure that you have a pristine flight simulator. Now, I will say a layout such as the TD or TD2 with rudder pedals is going to run you right around $7,500 up to $9,000. But you can also equate it to how many hours are you going to need to fly to stay current or get back into flying. So if you are seriously committed to flight simulation training, this is something to keep on your radar.
And of course, your average home simulator, that's not going to qualify as a BATD, right, Chris? So you'd obviously, I think people have done it though, right? Like I think I've heard of the odd person who's tried to, or I have a friend actually here in Canada who was working on trying to get his home sim, which is quite an elaborate setup, certified. So I think it's theoretically possible. I don't think it happens too often though.
It is theoretically possible. The FAA gets involved, so that is probably baked into a lot of the price from
Yeah.
Redbird is just all the paperwork and finances to get that final write-off of, hey, this is up to snuff, and this is going to make sure it reacts the way an airplane should, or at least close to 100% of the way an airplane should. So there are ways about it. But personally, I would not want an FAA representative swinging by my house or working with them closely to get it approved. It is a lot of work. And, the Redbird versions, they are a heavy price point. There are complementary, or I should say, other pieces out there that are at a lower price. If that's the tipping point for you. But we stand behind the Redbird brand. We've worked with them for a long time. We've got a couple around the office that I jump on every once in a while. But if you are committed again to keeping that currency, or as I'm so commonly asked, staying proficient with a simulator, there is a little bit of legality that comes into play.
Thank you.
Welcome. Sim your plane. This is a very interesting approach to flight simulation. It's actually kind of on the further side of, if you're going from a simulator to actually flying, this is you're actually flying and you have an airplane, but yet you want to sim in it. So the way it operates are on the left side of the screen, you can see some sensors, and their kits range anywhere, I think, from 3 maybe to 7 or 9 sensors. But anyone who's configured, say, a yoke or a rudder pedal or a throttle, when you get into your controllers and you do sensitivity testing or dedicating of left axis X or left axis Y, this is the same thing. You take one of those sensors, you attach it to your firewall, you take a little string, if you will. Think of the key cards that are on a hang and you stretch them out. You apply that wire or tension string to your yoke, and then you say, hey, start sensing this. I'm going to pull my yoke all the way back. It saves those commands. I'm going to push it all the way forward. Check. Okay. Now it only takes care of one axis. So think of pitch would take one sensor, roll, do the same thing, would take one sensor. Your throttle lever, you could apply it to your lever. As you pull it all the way out, you save that. As you push it all the way forward, you save that. And those are the extremes. So let's say we've mapped out our throttle, our yoke, our pedals, maybe propeller, maybe mixture. You jump into your airplane. You make sure you have a PC or a laptop, which is running a flight simulator with those customized settings we just talked about. You have a pair of VR goggles that's talking to the simulator and your airplane. And as you put those goggles on and you move your stick or your yoke to the left, in the simulator, it's going to move your stick or your yoke to the left. So you've just turned your actual airplane into the hardware for your flight simulation or flight simulator. I think this is a very interesting take. I someday want to try this. I've yet to do it. Through talks with the founder, I know that it was started for Red Bull racing. The way those races are set up is the plane goes in a trailer. It's moved to the location a few days before the race. They open up the trailer, they put the wings on, and they say you get a couple hours to fly this course that we just put up with new pylons and new rotation. And basically, there's not a lot of practice. You get maybe a couple hours to practice the course, or maybe even less. And then, hey, it's time to perform. And if you fly well, you win the race. Well, they decided we want a way to make sure we can know when to bank that stick hard to the left and pull back with a certain degree. And because the latency and the computing power these days is so built for performance and so strong, we now have the ability to jump in an airplane, fly those simulated routes, maneuvers, and from my conversation, it has benefited the Red Bull racing pilot quite a bit. So interesting take, pretty comparable pricing. It just requires that you have an airplane, VR goggles, and a computer. In conclusion, there are a lot of pieces out there that merge the real world of flight simulation and real world flying, excluding the previous slide for its literal merging of the real airplane and simulation. I do believe, again, ForeFlight is the leading product applicable to real world flying, while also significantly assisting in digital flying. There are plenty of hardware and software options out there also. But the resounding takeaway that I am continuously reminded of is that in today's high performance, fast computing world, a simulator owns the title of trainer much easier than it did about 10 years ago. I still remember mid 90s when I fired up my dad's PC and I looked at this green screen with a couple, 8-bit diagrams of blue and black. And it's amazing to think where we've come to today. And I really am excited to see where we can go in the next decade and how training in a simulator gets even closer to training in an airplane. So those are all of my slides. I'm now ready for any questions that have been saved. And Evan, thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris, for doing this. And do have a couple of questions saved up here. And if anyone else has other things you'd like to ask, now's a great time to send those in through the chat or by using that submit a question button for first officers, or even on YouTube and Facebook with the comments there. So I'll start with a question from Alvaro. This one came in earlier when you were talking about headsets and the options that are available. You were talking about I think it was the Thrustmaster headset that actually kind of fits on just like the David Clark. Is there an option to actually plug those directly to plug a real aviation headset, like a real David Clark, into the computer as well?
There is. Now, as long as you have PJ plugs, if you have a Limo plug headset or say an Airbus or military, it gets a little tricky. But Redbird actually offers a box for $130, I believe, that is a PJ plug receiver, and then that plugs right into a PC. So it creates that conversation piece between your actual headset. If you're flying typically with a Bose A20, the top of the line, but you want to use that on your simulator, you have that ability.
That's great. Yeah, and I think you've got a couple of options on your website too.
We do. If you go to Sporty's homepage, I've created a flight simulation tag right on that homepage, and there are different categories off there, but you'll see accessories will have that PJ plugin in addition to a lot of the pieces I talked about tonight, and even more that I didn't talk about. So, if I piqued your interest, I ask that maybe you click around and see if there's anything right for you.
And then from a co-founder Phil, actually wondering about, we ask this question a lot to various people who talk about the sort of cross-pollination between real-world flying and simming. How important do you think it is to sim your actual airplane? And I'm not talking about the cool sim your plane thing you showed us, but if I fly a Cherokee in real life, for example, do you think it's super important that I replicate my exact Cherokee in the simulator, or is it more about the general sort of I'm engaging my flying brain, maybe I'm talking to air traffic control on VATSIM and Pilot Edge, and the actual airplane that I'm flying in the sim is perhaps less important?
I want to answer it with kind of two answers. You hinted at it. I think there's something to be gained from flying in an airplane in a simulator, like you mentioned communications or better understanding avionics or the EFB. But to really take the most away from it, if you have your own airplane and that's all you're going to be flying, it makes sense for you to practice in the simulator in that same airplane. There's no point for me to jump in an Icon A5 and log 30 hours. But there is a lot of use for me to jump in a Cessna 172 or some of the customers I know who have, like you said, a Cherokee. Having that muscle memory, that remembering where things are as you go to cruise or as you go to descent or as you're doing your final turn to final checklist. It is helpful to have that because as we've seen, a lot of these default airplanes, and I'm sure a lot of people who have gotten in a simulator can attest, finding that parking brake sometimes is very difficult. It's not all the same in one spot and just the same as your throttle or your starter for the airplane or avionics switch. It is really helpful to do this in a simulator similar to your actual aircraft so that those parallels or the easy steps into the real airplane are as most applicable.
Yeah, very good. And lots of thank yous coming through the captain chat here. Greg, Dana, Ben, I'll say thank you for the great presentation. I will just maybe ask you one more thing, kind of tee you up. So many of the products that you talked about today, we have available as discounts. So we've got 5% off anything RealSimGear, which is, that in and of itself pays for your FSA captain membership right there. Sim Your Plane, which you mentioned, is another discount that we have. And we also have a discount on a Sporty's product. So maybe you want to talk just a little bit about that, which is more the other way. That's for a simmer who's deciding they want to take the plunge, as so many of us have done, and get into real world flying.
Absolutely, yes. So the promotion we are running is we put together a specific course bundle for Flight Sim Association attendees and members, where if you purchase our Learn to Fly course, as I hinted at earlier, which is an all-encompassing, I would say private certificate level course, which with some other add-ons in there, we're going to give you the Flying with ForeFlight course that we've put together for free. And just as I mentioned, there's new features coming out every year, every week, every month when it comes to ForeFlight. We're constantly updating our course to make sure it's leading. It's, we don't want someone saying you're highlighting a feature that, came out 3 years ago. Why aren't you showing the latest? So there's a real responsibility on us to keep it up to date. So we're pretty proud of this Flying with ForeFlight course and how it covers all the features. And just as a thank you for all the FSA members, we wanted to include that for anyone who buys the Learn to Fly course. So if you're on the fence, maybe that bundle at the price of just the Learn to Fly course could be interesting to you.
Very good. And one more question from Alvaro going on specifically around the headsets. So looking at those ability to connect a real headset to the PC, can you talk about a specific model that might be one that Alvaro could look at?
Specific connector, if you will, or a specific headset?
I think more just the connector, sort of a specific model, like the best of the things that you can use to connect a real headset to the computer.
Well, the two headsets I covered, those are already prepared to plug into a PC. But if your flight bag has whatever headset it is, the Lightspeed, Sigtronics, a David Clark, that little adapter box will make sure that it plugs into the PC. Now, to answer your question, I think fully, I do not know of another hardware piece that will allow a typical headset to talk to a computer. Maybe there's some Bluetooth options to work around. But to get a good working fidelity there, I think the Redbird plug-in box, which is on our site, I am 100% sure of it. It will make that connection. And you know what, Evan, if you want to send me their email address, I'd be more than happy to send them that piece along with a few others that may be helpful to them.
Sure, Alvaro. I'll put you guys both in connection after the webinar today, and thanks very much for the question. Thanks again for everyone for joining us this evening and for Chris taking the time to present on this. As I said, many of the products that you've mentioned and several of the subject areas that you've covered are also available through our website, whether that be through the form of a discount or we've got guides on many of the things that Chris has touched on here tonight as well. So I encourage those of you who might be new to Flight Sim Association or just new to simulation in general to poke around both our website and the Sporty's website website and take advantage of some of those discounts and that educational information. And of course, we at FSA are always happy to engage with you one-on-one and just have a chat about your goals and what you're looking to accomplish with home flight simulation. So thanks again for joining us. Thanks, Chris, for the time. We look forward to seeing everyone on our next webinar.